I had stayed behind at the office a little longer than usual, the hum of the air conditioner and the clicking of my keyboard the only sounds in the empty floor. The kind of silence that feels almost too heavy, like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I was finishing up a report when my phone buzzed with a message from my boss, Thomas. "Can you come into my office before you leave?" Normally, these messages are harmless, clarifications, last-minute requests, or feedback that could be delivered in an email. But something about the tone of that message made my stomach tighten in anticipation. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should just reply. Can it wait until tomorrow? But curiosity won, as it often does. Thomas' office was at the far end of the hallway, a small corner space that always smelled faintly of coffee and cedar wood. The blinds were half drawn, casting stripes of amber light across the mahogany desk. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable, though there was a softness in his eyes that made the air between us feel different, warmer, somehow more personal than usual. "Thanks for coming in," he said, his voice low, steady, familiar. He gestured toward the chair in front of his desk, but didn't sit. I perched on the edge, heart beating just a little too fast. There was a pause, one of those long silences where both people are thinking more than speaking, and I realized that for the first time, I wasn't thinking about deadlines or quarterly reports. I was thinking about him. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he began, leaning back slightly. "And it's not work-related." My chest tightened in a mix of curiosity and cautious excitement. In all the years I'd worked here, Thomas had always been professional, approachable, even kind, but this felt different. Something unspoken hung in the air, thick enough to touch, yet delicate enough to slip through your fingers if you weren't careful. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm listening." He paused, as if weighing each word before releasing it. "I've noticed how hard you've been working, how much you care, not just about the job, but about the people around you. And I wanted you to know, it doesn't go unnoticed. You're remarkable, and I don't say that lightly." I blinked, caught off guard by the intensity of his gaze, the sincerity in his tone. I felt a warmth spreading from my chest, a mixture of relief and something tender, something that made the tight knot of daily stress unravel just a little. Thank you," I said finally, my voice quivering in a way I hadn't expected. "That means a lot." And then, unexpectedly, he smiled, not the polite, professional smile reserved for meetings and presentations, but a small, genuine curve of lips that made the air between us feel alive. That moment, brief and quiet, held a world of unspoken possibilities, and I realized that my evening commute would no longer be just about going home. Something had shifted in the subtle spaces of our connection, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. As I left his office, the hallway felt different too, softer somehow, charged with a quiet anticipation that had nothing to do with work. That night, walking to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had just nudged off the path I thought it was on. And I knew, deep down, that things would never be quite the same again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The office lights, Thomas's words, the warmth in his eyes, everything replayed in my mind like a quiet film I couldn't pause. I kept telling myself it was just a compliment, that I was overthinking it. But something about the way he looked at me, as if seeing more than the surface, made my thoughts wander far from spreadsheets and deadlines. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual, coffee in hand, hoping to ground myself in routine. But the moment I stepped into the office, I felt a subtle shift, a trace of anticipation hanging in the air like morning mist. Thomas was already there, standing by the window with his hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the city skyline. The sunlight caught his profile in a way that made his face seem softer, more contemplative. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned, offering a small smile. "Morning." There was a pause, just long enough to make me aware of how closely we'd been orbiting each other since that evening. We went about our morning routine, emails, meetings, client calls, but under it all, a quiet electricity lingered. Every glance, every casual comment felt charged, and I found myself noticing things I hadn't before. The way he tapped his pen when he was thinking, the subtle scent of his cologne, the calm steadiness in his voice that somehow made my own thoughts slow down. By mid-afternoon, I was nearly distracted out of my mind. That's when he called me back into his office. My heart skipped. This time the blinds were fully open, sunlight streaming in and bouncing off the polished surfaces, but instead of intimidating me, the light felt warm, inviting. "I wanted to talk to you. Again," he said, leaning against his desk this time, hands folded. "About last night." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my pulse from racing. "About the compliment?" I asked, unsure whether to laugh nervously or just sit in the tension. "No," he said softly, shaking his head. "Not just that. I meant what I said. But there's more. I think there's a connection between us that goes beyond the office." The words hung in the air, fragile yet heavy, like a glass ornament balanced on the edge of a table. My mind spun with caution, curiosity, and an unexpected thrill. I'd never imagined a workplace could feel like this, a place where professionalism and vulnerability could coexist so tangibly. "I feel it too," I admitted before I could second-guess myself. The words surprised me, not just because I said them out loud, but because they were true. There was a quiet bond forming between us, subtle and unspoken, yet undeniable. Thomas's gaze softened, a flicker of relief passing across his features. "I wasn't sure you'd feel the same. I didn't want to overstep or make things uncomfortable." "You haven't," I assured him. "It's unexpected, but not unwelcome." We sat there for a few moments, the sound of the office humming faintly around us, our conversation tapering into a comfortable silence. It was intimate in a way I hadn't experienced in years, sharing space without needing to fill it with words, just feeling understood. When I finally left his office that day, it wasn't just the anticipation of curiosity that followed me. It was a quiet, profound awareness. Something had shifted, deeper than a fleeting attraction. I felt seen, truly seen, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. I realized that sometimes the moments that change everything aren't loud or dramatic. They're small, deliberate, and tender, leaving you with a gentle yet undeniable imprint on your heart. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, thinking about the way Thomas had looked at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that life had nudged open a door I hadn't even noticed was there, and for the first time in a long time, I wanted to step through it. The next morning, I arrived at the office with a mix of anticipation and nerves I hadn't felt in years. It's funny how something as simple as seeing someone you trust can make your chest tighten and your thoughts scatter at the same time. Thomas was already there, quietly reviewing some files, and for a moment, I hesitated at the doorway, wondering if I should just pretend like nothing had shifted. But as soon as he looked up, that soft, understanding gaze met mine, and all hesitation melted away. There was a subtle, unspoken agreement in that look, a mutual acknowledgement that what was happening between us was real, and that it was okay. "Morning," he said, his tone casual but with a warmth that reached straight to my heart. "Morning," I replied, trying to steady my voice, though I could feel my pulse in my throat. The day passed in a blur of routine, yet every interaction with him was tinged with something new, something unspoken. A shared glance during a meeting, a brief brush of hands as we passed in the hallway, the way our conversations seemed to linger just a little longer. It was a subtle dance, delicate and precise, yet full of tension and promise. By late afternoon, the office was quiet again. Most of the staff had left, leaving only the soft hum of computers and the faint click of keyboards. I was finishing up a report when Thomas appeared in the doorway, a folder in his hand. "Do you have a moment?" he asked, and I noticed the slight hesitation in his tone, the way he seemed to measure each word. "Of course," I said, setting my pen down. He gestured toward a chair near the window, where the evening light streamed in, casting a golden glow across the room. "I wanted to talk about something, more personal this time," he began. His voice was low, steady, but there was an edge of vulnerability in it that made my heart ache. I nodded, unsure of what to say, just willing to listen. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about us," he admitted, "about the connection we share. And I want you to know that it's not just fleeting. It's important to me." Hearing those words made something inside me shift, a mixture of relief, joy, and a quiet fear of what comes next. "It is important to me too," I said softly, feeling the honesty in my own voice. For a long moment, we just sat there, the room filled with a quiet understanding that neither of us had felt before. There was no rush, no expectation, just presence, just recognition of what had quietly grown between us. Then he leaned slightly closer, and the air seemed to hum around us. "I don't want to complicate things, but I also can't ignore this," he said. His hand hovered near mine on the desk, hesitant, but not withdrawn. I placed my hand over his, a simple gesture, but one that carried more weight than words ever could. The warmth of his touch, the steadiness of his grip, grounded me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. "That's all I need," I whispered. "Just honesty. Just this." And in that moment, I realized that the connection we were building wasn't about impulse or desire. It was about trust, understanding, and the quiet courage to let ourselves be vulnerable. The office, with its sterile walls and fluorescent lights, had become a space of discovery, a place where hearts could speak without fear. As the evening approached and I finally left the office, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and calm. My steps were lighter, my mind clearer, and my heart full in a way that had nothing to do with work. I knew that whatever came next, I was ready to face it, because for the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen and truly alive. The next few days felt surreal, almost suspended in a gentle haze of anticipation and quiet joy. I noticed myself smiling more, walking with a lighter step, even during the monotony of meetings and reports. Everything about the office felt different now. The hum of the air conditioner, the sunlight through the blinds, even the scent of coffee seemed richer somehow, infused with meaning. Thomas and I continued to navigate our new connection carefully, with patience and respect. There was no rush, no dramatic declarations, just a deepening understanding, an unspoken promise that we could explore this without fear. Every conversation, every shared glance, every small gesture became a thread weaving us closer together. I realized that intimacy didn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes it was in the quiet moments, the subtle recognition of another soul. One evening, as the office emptied and the city outside glowed with the amber of streetlights, Thomas invited me into his office once more. The room felt warmer than usual, bathed in the soft glow of his desk lamp, the shadows curling around us like a private world. "I've been thinking," he said, voice low, almost hesitant, "about how this started and how much it's grown. And I want you to know that I respect you completely, and I want whatever happens next to be mutual, comfortable, and real." I felt a lump in my throat, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of his sincerity. "I want that too," I whispered, my hand brushing his as naturally as breathing. We talked for hours that evening, not about work, not about obligations, but about ourselves, our hopes, our quiet fears, and the paths that had brought us to this moment. It was astonishing how deeply a single conversation could transform everything, how words, spoken with honesty, could create a bridge between two hearts. As I finally stood to leave, Thomas reached out, gently holding my hand. "No matter what," he said softly, "I want you to know that you're seen, truly seen and appreciated, not just for what you do, but for who you are." The vulnerability in his voice mirrored my own, and in that shared honesty, I realized something profound. The emotional connection we had discovered wasn't fleeting, wasn't bound by circumstance. It was a mutual recognition of worth, a quiet intimacy that could sustain itself without need for grand drama. Walking to my car that night, the cool evening breeze brushing against my face, I felt a deep sense of clarity and peace. The city lights reflected in the wet pavement tiny mirrors of possibility, and I realized that life had a way of surprising us when we least expected it. Sometimes the most transformative experiences come in the quietest moments, whispered between the lines of ordinary days. I smiled to myself, knowing that whatever the future held, I had discovered something invaluable, a connection built on trust, respect, and genuine care. And as I drove home, I felt an unexpected lightness, a sense that even after decades of navigating life's routines and responsibilities, there were still moments waiting to reshape us, quietly and beautifully, in ways we never imagined. That evening changed everything, not because of drama or grand gestures, but because it reminded me that true emotional connection, the kind that endures, is born from honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to truly see someone and be seen in return.